everybody. So thanks to being with us. And yeah, as Mehmet said, we will do the second webinar according to breakover. And as I promised the last time, we will speak about the effect of trimming and shoeing on breakover. So a little bit more practical session. Yeah, and how I said, or Mehmet said, we had already something about the biomechanics of breakover. We repeated some anatomical structures and the different aspects of breakover. And on the same aspects we will focus today, but how I said, with the shoeing and trimming and how it affects different timing and geometric aspects of the breakover. Yeah, we all know that we can apply different types of horseshoes, that we can modify the toe of our horseshoe, the position of our horseshoes, and how I said, we will see how this influences, for example, the timing. And everybody knows in the field, we have sometimes horses, or actually I think quite often horses, where we try to change something on the toe of our shoes or by our trimming with the intention to ease breakover. Yeah, so, but what is this ease of breakover? So there's not really a definition how to ease breakover. And I'll start with two cases actually. One is a non-lame sport horse, a vaulting horse. And as you can see, it's not lame, it's quite sound, it's competing, it's trained, it's quite high level sport horse, but you see uneven hoof angles. And so actually a horse where you would say by the hoofs, you would like to increase symmetry, you would like to adapt the hoof angles, but the horse has this uneven hoof angles acquired, and it's a long-term existing situation. Without measuring, so if you just see the horse, you're not sure about how it perform or how its performance work. And if you measure with black, for example, you see in the swing phase, although it has uneven hoof angles, it has a quite good symmetry in the flight arc. So both limbs move more or less in the same height of the flight arcs, which is actually a quite good intended locomotion pattern in sport horses, because we actually look for symmetry. So we have a structural asymmetry, but how I said, in swing phase, it's a quite satisfying picture. We have a good symmetry in the locomotion. But if we look on breakover, you see before and after, before shoeing, the left and the right hoof, and you see this, the flatter hoof, the 43-degree angled hoof, has a longer breakover duration than the right hoof, the steeper one. Yeah, so if you have such a horse, even if you don't know exactly the breakover timings, you would intend to improve the symmetry in breakover and with the hoof angles. With black, you can definitely see something, so you can calculate or you can measure the timings, and you see, of course, there's a difference between the uneven feet in breakover duration. So you try to adapt your shoeing. You will maybe treat the hoofs a little bit different. So that was the same I did also. And after shoeing, you see you have an improvement of breakover symmetry. So you could adapt a little bit the breakover timing of both front feet. So now is the question, we focus a lot on breakover because this is something we can directly influence and change on the shoes. But what happens with the swing phase? And if you see the swing phase, the flight arc before and after shoeing, you see after shoeing we have an increase in breakover symmetry and hoof angle symmetry, but not in flight arc. Yeah, so you would say, oh, yeah, what happened now? This is something you can just see if you use systems as black, because you know exactly the height of the flight arcs and small changes in the locomotion pattern. But don't worry, yeah, we have now changed something at the shoes. We influence breakover and breakover timing, but you see breakover is always associated with the swing phase. We will speak about the swing phase, I think, in another webinar. But since breakover is the phase for limb propulsion to swing phase, the whole locomotor system has to adapt, of course. Yeah? And if you give the horse a few days or weeks for adaptation, as we measured now, we see the horse after 4 weeks. So the breakover symmetry improved again. So we have a quite nice symmetry in breakover. Hoof angle is also nicely adapted, and swing phase slowly comes back to a quite good symmetry. So this is an example I choose because I thought it's not a general thinking. Yeah, you have to think a little bit more wider. So all gait pattern or all gait phases belongs together. So swing phase, breakover, stance phase, everything is connected to each other. So if you influence one parameter, you might also affect another parameter. But the second thing is you have a neuromuscular determination and learning. So the whole locomotor system need to adapt to your changes and even to the new shoeing or to maybe a toe modification to ease breakover. Yeah, so you need sometimes to measure a few days or weeks after, and then you see if your shoeing is working in the intended way. But this was a nice case to see how we can affect breakover, how it influences swing phase, and how the locomotor system learns and adapts to the new situation. A little bit more tricky is it if you have the lame horse. You know the case from the last time. It was a horse with podotroglosis. It is 2 out of 5 lame when we saw it the first time, and it is more lame on the left front foot. Yeah, so you see also the left one is the steeper one, the left one is the little bit more deformed one. And there you also have quite severe changes in the navicular bone. Yeah. So this horse was presented, how I said, with moderate lameness. And before shoeing with the old shoes, when we got it, it had a quite heavy Ekbar shoe. It had a rubber rim to have some shock absorption. And you see you have quite a difference between left and right hoof angle associated with a difference in breakover. But this time you have to watch here. This time we have the steeper hoof with the longer breakover difference. So the opposite than the last time. So it's not that always the steeper hoof has the shorter breakover duration. If you have a lameness or a disorder associated on this foot, you usually have the lame limb with a longer breakover duration, even if it's a steeper one. We decided to relieve the hoof a little bit because, how I said, it was a quite heavy shoeing and the Ekbar was not very well positioned. So we decided to go back to the basics more or less and shod the horse with a setback shoe and just normal roll toe quarter clip shoe, just to have an idea what happens if we just shoe with a basic. The swing phase was in the beginning quite even. And when we shot the horse with the new shoes, you saw the left-right symmetry and breakover improved a lot. It was even actually. So with our shoeing, the horse reacted directly and we could achieve a symmetry and breakover duration, even if we haven't changed a lot in the different hoof angles. So if you have a lame horse like this with such a pathology, it's usually not possible to have directly adaptation of hoof angles, but still by changing the position of the shoes and changing a little bit the roll toe in between left and right, you can at least achieve a functional symmetry. Even if you have a structural asymmetry, you can have a functional asymmetry with your shoeing. And in this case, we also have still a nice even swing phase pattern, a nice even height of the flight arc. So here you can see the horse is quite happy, quite sound. It improved also comfort and was a little bit less lame. So this is something you really like if you shoe. Not all cases work like this. But now it's interesting how it develops over time. So you see the same horse with the shoeing we applied in the first shoeing 7 weeks later. So still the roll toe quarter clip shoes and uneven hoof angles, but the symmetry between breakover is still quite nice. So 7 milliseconds, it's actually nothing. We don't have a threshold, so this is something we haven't developed yet, so we can't tell you a bilateral difference of a certain amount is a lameness. This is not possible at the moment, but 7 milliseconds, it's more or less nothing. And after our shoeing with new shoes, we stood with more or less the same shoe design, but we decided to add a little bit more comfort because the owners wanted to go train a little bit more. The owners wanted to prepare the horse maybe a little bit for little competitions. So we decided to protect the navicular region with a nice pad and some soft packing. And you see again, the breakover difference in timing is quite nice, quite even. The horse is comfortable. So yeah, up to now, we could be very satisfied. But then they trained quite a lot. So they used the horse, they wanted to compete. And the last time they came, we had this situation suddenly with the same shoeing or two shoeing cycles later, so 12 weeks later, 12 weeks training, we saw this picture. So I measured the horse and I could already see that it's more lame, but also the measurements showed that the left hoof, the more affected hoof, has a really long breakover duration. So this is something you always should focus. Yeah. So if you see such a sudden change and such a long breakover duration, you should be aware that there might some pathologies are going on and it's developing in the wrong direction. And usually if you manipulate a navicular hoof, if you hammer, if you flex and extend the coffin joint and you manipulate on these hooves, they don't like it that much in this case as well. So you see also the hoof has an uneven flight arc height. So if you have uneven breakover, it might be often associated with an uneven height in flight arc, even if, in particular if you have a lame horse. And after shoeing, it became even worse. So now we have the situation, I think the horse is quite overworked. We have an uneven breakover duration, we have an uneven flight arc, and this is something you can monitor very nice with the black system, yeah, because now you have a kind of follow-up monitoring. So the next time I go there, now of course the horse is back to rest, so it's not trained a lot. So I hope it will stabilize and we will adapt the shoeing probably, and it will be treated. But I wanted to show you the example because with our shoeing, it's always interacting with the condition of the horse. Yeah, it might be the locomotor system itself, but it might be also something as lameness. Nothing changed locomotion as much as pain. Yeah? But I think both examples show you the practical relevance of breakover and how we can, or that we can affect it with our shoeing. And I would like to give you a little bit more scientific overview. So actually we aim with our trimming and shoeing to relieve the navicular region or the deep digital flexor tendon or the suspension of the dorsal aspect of the distal phalanx and the hoof. So these regions you would like to affect, we already spoke about it the last time. But as I said, how can we relieve it? And is there really a proof of our effect? So this is the big question of tonight, because we know if we trim the hoofs, we usually try to change a little bit the conformation and the position and the posture of the horse and the hoof. So we can remove a little bit toe, we can shorten the toe, and then we aim more or less to reduce the lever arm or the moment arm affecting the coffin joint. This is something we try to achieve by trimming, but in a certain moment, there's not enough hoof to trim anymore. So in one moment we have not enough toe, we don't have enough material to shorten more and to achieve even a better condition for the horse. So in this moment we actually apply shoes to improve the effect of our trimming or to protect, of course, the hoof. But with different shoe designs, it can be a roll toe, rocker toe, or just a changed shoe position. We can place the shoe a little bit more palmar. So all these modifications and some more, I just aim to improve the effect of our trim and to ease, to ease breakover. And the ease of breakover is nothing else than changing the breakover distance. This is something we just do by handcraft, and this can be measured. I will show you some research on it. But we also aim and intend to influence the breakover duration. And there's a very big question mark, because in the past, some previous studies couldn't really confirm that you have an influence on the breakover duration with different shoeings. And also we try to affect a little bit the point of breakover, and there's always the discussion, should I let the horses break over their natural point on the toe, or shall I change and force a central located breakover? All these aspects we try to influence with our shoeing. And this is also the guideline for the next slides. So we just start with a little history. So there were some studies, or quite a lot study actually, which were measuring the effect of trimming and shoeing on the breakover distance. So actually the moment arm affecting the coffin joint. I just choose 3. I think there are some more, but these 3 are, in my opinion, the best designed and most valuable studies you can get. And there are very little studies on trimming, but one is examining the effect of trimming on the hoof morphology. It's done by Hilary Clayton, and they said there's a significant reduction of the moment of the distance between the distal phalanx and the toe. So during 4 months, a regular trimming can change the distance the distal phalanx has to break over. So the breakover distance is shortened. This is something she found out, but she did it on a very specific small population with quite a lot of locomotion. So that's nothing you can really transfer to our domestic horses in Europe. So, and I miss a little bit the long-term effect over a few more months and some measurements between the different trimming intervals. And that's why we performed our own study. It's quite a while ago, but it was a long-term study over 10 months where we examined 75 horses, and they were trimmed with 3 different trimming methods, and we could show that all different trimmings had a significant short-term effect on the breakover distance. So the moment arm affecting the coffin joint decreased. So directly after trimming, so if we shorten, for example, the toe, we can definitely shorten the moment arm. This is maybe not so surprising, but what is more interesting is it sustainable during an 8 weeks trimming interval or over 10 months? So do we have a sustainable influence? In this, unfortunately, we don't have. So at least if you have an 8-week trimming interval, the hoof growth is definitely overlapping the effect of your trim. So this is a good proof that you actually should shorten the trimming interval maybe to 4 or 6 weeks if you really want to have a sustainable effect on the moment arm affecting the coffin joint. Yeah. So, and if we have another study according to horseshoes, there was Eliashar. He did a very nice study comparing the effect of a plain steel shoe with a palmally placed quarter clip shoe and an NBS shoe. And he just measured the moment arm affecting the coffin joint in radiographs. And he said you can significantly decrease the moment arm affecting the coffin joint. Yeah, it's very obvious. If you somehow modify the toe to ease breakover, you have a shortened moment arm. Actually, the intention of the study was also to investigate if you can decrease strain on the deep digital flexor tendon or pressure on the navicular bone. But we will wait for this with a few slides. I just continue with some other studies. Oh, sorry, now we just jump in here. Because, how I said, if you have a shorter moment arm affecting the coffin joint, if the dorsal leverage is minimized, it should be actually easier for the toe and the hoof to break over. So actually the deep digital flexor tendon don't need to pull that much. So if you have less strain in the deep digital flexor tendon, you have less pressure on the navicular bone. But unfortunately, Eliashar couldn't measure it, so he couldn't see a significant change on peak forces affecting the navicular region, or also not the deep digital flexor tendon. But if you look at the numbers, so if you look in the first line of the peak forces on the navicular bone, and you compare the 3 values from the 3 different shoeings, you see actually there's a tendency of decrease. So with a setback shoe or with the NBS shoe, so shoes which ease or improve breakover and reduce moment arm, they actually have a tendency to reduce peak forces on the navicular bone. Yeah, so sometimes it's worth it to have a detailed look on the papers, because sometimes it's just a question on the amount of horses, so how many horses they studied, and on the technique they used. So in this case, we couldn't conclude a significant change, but maybe there are some tendencies. Yeah, so this sometimes it's worth it to make studies with on old questions. So, and we did some current studies with different horseshoes with Bergman a while ago. So we examined different modified horseshoes, and one aspect was to measure the moment arm acting on the coffin joint. And we can say that all shoes, open toe shoes or rocker shoes, definitely reduce the moment arm. But it's not just the position and the design of the shoe, it's also a change in toe angulation. So if you have, for example, heel wedges, then you can change also the moment arm affecting the coffin joint. because this is quite obvious. Yeah, we did a little bit the same as Eliasha did. We could also prove it. Now, of course, it's just geometry, but this is something you can also explain the owners. Yeah, so if you apply a shoe with a rolled toe or set back, you can reduce moment arm affecting the coffin joint. But how I said, it's also important how the hoof is positioned or the hoof orientation. So if you have a heel elevation, for example, by wedges, yeah, then you also decrease the moment arm because the hoof is already in an average position to break over. Yeah, so you have already a little flexion in the coffin joint, so it's a little bit easier of the dorsal aspect of the hoof to break over. Yeah. Also the open toe shoe, and with this shoe you have actually both. You always have a little slightly elevation of the orientation of the hoof, so it's a little bit steeper, but you also have a setback breakover because you have the toe open, so you don't have material covering the toe and giving leverage, so you can bring the breakover quite back to the palmar aspect of the toe. And if you do this, we could prove in dynamics. So if you do, for example, high-speed fluoroscopic imaging, you can see with open toe shoes and with heel elevation by wedges, you have less extension during breakover in motion. Yeah, so, okay, so we can conclude also with the shoes. With the shoes on penetrable ground, you can have an effect on this parameter. So if you have, for example, bar shoes, you have a steeper orientation of hoofs on penetrable ground. That means, again, you have a little bit more flexion in the coffin joints, less leverage affecting the breakover distance. So in this moment, of course, it's easier for the horses to break over, which is quite an average or benefit if you have horses suffering, for example, navicular problems or flexor tendon injuries. If you add a wide toe shoe, then you have a little bit the opposite. These shoes cause a flatter orientation on penetrable ground because the wide toe reduces sinking of the tip of the hoof. So if you have a flatter hoof orientation, you have more extension in the fetlock joint, a longer moment arm on the dorsal aspect of the hoof. So you make it a little bit more difficult for the horse to break over. This might be an unintended side effect. So you would like to treat, for example, the suspensory ligament, but you overstress or overload a little bit the navicular region and during breakover. So these side effects you have to keep in mind. And maybe if you apply such a shoe, you should modify it in a way that the horse can break over a little bit more easily to reduce the side effect. Yeah. One of the most severe modifications in the context of breakover is the rocker shoe. Usually the position is a little bit steeper. You have a very, very reduced dorsal moment arm and you have very little resistance on the ground because it's just rolling over the toe and it's very easy. We will come back to this shoeing in the end of the presentation. It looks as a benefit. In orthopedic context, it might be always a benefit, but in, let's say, performance context, this might be also a problem. Yeah. But we spoke now about a very easy part. This is something we do all day long in the field. So we reduce something, or we change something at the horseshoe, at the toe of the horseshoe, and the position of the horseshoe. So it's very obvious that we change the distance of breakover. But now it's a big question: are we really increase the breakover duration? So are we really changing decrease breakover duration? Are we really making the breakover quicker? So is it really easier for the horses? And this question was examined by different groups, also Hilary Clayton again, but also Maaike van Heer or Spark. He did it at the hind feet. There are very little studies on hind feet, and they examined the effect of shoeing on the breakover duration. Yeah. And if you compare different studies, there's actually, unfortunately, one main result. So all of the studies stated up to now that there's no effect of different horseshoes, rolled toe shoes, or side clip palmarly placed shoes. None of the modified shoes had a significant effect on the breakover duration, neither in the front feet nor in the hind feet. Yeah, so this is a little bit disappointing, you could say, but again, we watched the numbers, and if you see the study of Clayton, it was a very, very nice performed study, and also the technique was quite good. So you can see that there is a tendency again, and she's even stating that she definitely see a tendency, but in the population of her examined horses, it was just not mathematically significant. But this tendency was actually the key that we decided to do an own study and examine again with our technique, with some innovative IMU techniques, with Black, the influence of shoeing on the breakover duration. Yeah, and that's how we did it. So we tried to find 10 sound crossbred horses. So we had different types of different breeds of horses, but they were sound, they were non-lame, and they were in one stable. So it's not really easy to find 10 non-lame sound horses in one stable. Sometimes it's a challenge. And we examined these horses on firm and penetrable ground with the Black sensors. And these horses were just equipped with sensors. They were measured barefoot before trimming, and then after trimming, and then with 12 modifications. We did a lot of documentation. We measured front and hind feet, how I said, on firm and penetrable ground with experienced handler and an experienced team. And we did 12 modifications, and the relevant modifications for tonight are that we examined the effect of heel elevation with 5-degree heel wedges, with a plain toe clip steel shoe, with a rolled toe clip shoe, and with a palmally placed quarter clip shoe. The other shoes were with another intention. They're not relevant for tonight, but this is something which is in a practical way, something we would apply in the field as well. And this is how it was looking. So we had barefoot after trimming. So all horses were regularly trimmed. So it was not that we had a very long toe. It was just a normal routine trim. We taped 5-degree heel wedges, and then we used the plain toe clip shoe to create the rolled toe clip shoe. And then we used a second shoe to create this quarter clip shoe. And how you can see, it was a typically placed and created shoeing. It was not very, let's say, it was not a laboratory shoeing, it was a practical approach. And this was how it was looking from the front. You can see the different toe modifications. And then all values were uploaded, and we did a speed correction. This is already included in the system up to now. So if you buy the system, if you use the system, all data will be automatically speed corrected, because you can imagine the faster the horse walk, the faster, for example, is breakover duration or all the other timing aspects. And to compare different measurements, you need to speed correct all data. This is in your system already included, and we did it just by some algorithms. And that was the main output. We could conclude that trimming had no effect on the breakover duration, but we have to say we had just normal trimmed hoofs. So we had not, as the study of Clayton, for example. In the study of Clayton, there was a horse population where they let the hoofs grow, where they really created long toes by just letting them grow over a few weeks. And then they distinctly shortened the toe by trimming. So this was a very different approach. Of course, then you will see a difference. But if you just do a routine trim, then you have horses growing more on the heels, some horses growing more on the toe, and some horses you shorten more or less even. And this makes it impossible to see a significant difference before and after shoeing. What doesn't mean that you have an effect if you have, for example, horses where you distinctly shorten the toe because they were growing with a long toe. But what was more relevant is that heel elevation definitely caused a decrease of breakover duration. So we definitely could confirm that heel elevation, that a more steeper position of the hoof reduce the duration of breakover. So this is something which is fitting to the geometric aspect. And this is, I think, the key result. If you add a plain steel shoe on a barefoot, you will increase the breakover duration. Yeah, so if you just add a plain steel shoe on a normal barefoot hoof, you will add some material in the region of the toe, and this causes an increase in breakover duration. So it makes it a little bit more difficult for the horse to break over. Yeah, so this stresses actually the meaning of toe design which ease breakover. So all toes or all shoes which ease breakover, it doesn't matter how you make it. If you make a roll toe, or if you bring the shoe back, if you place it a little bit more palmally or plantarly, it will decrease the breakover duration. Yeah, so it doesn't matter how you create the toe, it will ease breakover. It will at least shorten breakover duration. Yeah, so this is a really important result. If you compare the modified horseshoes with barefoot, it's not that you have benefit against barefoot. So the barefoot and the roll toe shoes or quarter clip shoes have more or less the same breakover duration. Yeah, so this is something you run behind the ideal a little bit. Yeah, so maybe if you create a really severe palmally placed breakover, however you make it, maybe with an open toe shoe, you maybe can even shorten the breakover duration that much that it's faster than a barefoot hoof. But in general, you just can achieve the barefoot situation in breakover duration by creating roll toe or palmally placed shoes. Yeah, but still the main message is that shoes which ease breakover definitely shorten breakover duration. So now the last aspect of breakover is the point of breakover. So where does the horse breaking over? How many forces affecting the point of breakover? And there's very little research done. One was from Michael van Heelen, one was Spark as well. And they examined actually how smooth breakover happens and what peak forces affect the point of breakover at the toe. And they said if you have a toe clipped shoe, you have quite high pressure peaks at the last hoof ground contact. So if you see our pressure image and you see the little line running there, so then you have the beginning of the line, this is the left foot, is the initial contact. Then you have the mid stance, and from there breakover starts. And usually a lot of horses, as we learned the last time, break over the lateral toe, 75% more or less. And at the point of breakover, you see red and orange colors, so this means you have quite high pressure peaks in this area. Yeah. If you add a side clip as a quarter clip shoe, or if you add a roll toe shoe, Michael van Heelen could show that it's smoother and that you can decrease these pressure peaks. Yeah, and we studied the effect of trimming on this aspect, and it's a little bit the same, or we say at least over 10 months. That you can't really change the location of the point of breakover. So you can maybe change the conformation of the hoof, and you can maybe bring the break or point of breakover a little bit back. But if a horse breaks over the lateral toe, then usually it breaks over the lateral toe. Yeah, so you have to make really severe changes. It's very hard to achieve it just by trimming, to change the learned motion pattern of a horse. So I think if we speak about swing phase in one of the next webinars, I will explain you how locomotion is actually determined and influenced by the central nervous system and by the muscles. So it's very difficult to change a locomotion pattern of the horse. And since the way of breakover, so how the horse breaks over, is belonging to the motion pattern, trimming had not a significant effect. But what we can see is, if you compare, for example, the horseshoe after 8 weeks, so an old worn horseshoe, you see everything is more or less blue. Yeah, so we have little pressure, so it's easy for the horse to roll over the worn toe, and you have little pressure peaks. After trimming, as a preparation for shoeing, we don't have a bevel toe. You see the breakover, point of breakover is affected by high pressure peaks, but the curve, so the progress of the breakover is more or less the same. So it's still the same horse. So it breaks over the lateral toe. It's quite smooth. Barefoot even more a little bit than with the old shoes, but you see a quite nice lateral breakover. When we shoe the horse with a more or less plain steel shoe with just a slightly grinded edge on the dorsal aspect of the horseshoe, you see it's still breaking over the lateral aspect of the toe, and maybe the pressure peaks decreased a little bit due to the grinding, but it's a little bit more abrupt, it's a little bit more sudden changes. Yeah, it's not so smooth anymore. So now the horse needs to do some effort to wear the shoe again, to have a smooth breakover again. And this is also a fact which stresses to create a wide roll toe or make a wide bend if you have enough material at the hoof to give enough space for breaking over the natural part of the toe of the hoof. Yeah. Here's also one of our horses. So here you see a horse shod with a plain steer shoe and a horse, same hoof, shod with a palmally placed quarter clip shoe. And you see directly after changing the shoes that the pressure peaks decrease with the palmally placed roll toe shoe. So yeah, so we have less ground resistance. Keep this in mind. We will have one more aspect about this in a second. We can also see it if we have the open toe shoe. Of course, we have a relief of the toe. So we have an open toe. Of course, there's not pressure affecting the very much dorsal aspect of the hoof, but horses are forced a little bit to break over one of the branches. So if you have a horse breaking over the lateral aspect of the hoof, then usually they tend to have a high pressure peak and break over the lateral branch of the open toe shoe. This is also something you should keep in mind, that you create high pressure peaks, in particular during breakover, because you have sharp edges in the end of the branches of the shoe. So this is something you should grind carefully, and you should apply some packing and pads. Sorry. And then at the last, we have the rocker shoes. And you see there, everything is more or less blue. We said already, it brings the point of breakover quite far palmally. But now is the question, if we need some ground resistance, so we need, or the horse at least, needs a certain amount of ground resistance to have an active gait pattern. Yeah, so if you have horses are affected by orthopedic injuries or disorders, yeah, so they usually have kind of box rest, perform that much, then it's nice to have a smooth and easy breakover, not a lot of effort for the tendons and ligaments or the joints. If you have a performing horse, they actually need to have an active gait pattern. So you would like to have a certain amount of ground resistance to enable an efficient limb propulsion to swing phase and to have a nice active gait pattern without too much muscle work. Yeah, so this is a question. If you have dressage horses or gait horses, you should probably leave them a little ground resistance, so not too much rock out, not too much grind toe, to enable a little bit more efficient gait without too much muscle energy. And I will close with 3 case reports just on this topic, because how I said, we have little research on how to affect the point of breakover. And we see a horse with what was shot with a Duplo, with an artificial horseshoe. And I just marked the point of breakover of the left and the right foot. You see in both feet, it's more or less centrally a little bit located at the lateral aspect of the toe where the horse is breaking over. And we decided to shoe it with an aluminum shoe with a rolled toe and pad and packing. And you can, because the owner wanted to have a shock absorption, and in both cases, we changed the point of breakover. It's a question, where's the natural point of breakover? Yeah, so if we change the gait pattern of the horse, it's always a question, what is the natural one and where do we force it? But I think if you have a nice aluminum shoe with a rolled toe, you leave enough space that the horse can choose. The artificial horseshoe was not very nice positioned. It was reaching a little bit dorsal over the toe. So I think it was forcing the horse a little bit too much in a certain way of breakover. It was not walking very comfortable. Then we have a lame horse again. It's lame on the right limb. And before shoeing and after shoeing, if you compare the left foot before and after shoeing, you see definitely a change of the point of breakover from lateral to medial toe. But on the affected, on the diseased hoof, you don't see any change at all. So the locomotion pattern stays actually the same. There's again, don't be disappointed if you see something like this. Pain covers more or less everything. So pain is one of the strongest factors affecting equine locomotion, and sometimes we can't really change something with our shoeing. Yeah. And the last case, you see I haven't marked anything. This is also before and after shoeing, but it's a 24-year-old horse. So it's a quite old horse with a certain learned locomotion pattern. And also these horses are sometimes very difficult to affect. So these horses learned a certain way of moving their limbs on breaking over. And if you just do a standard shoeing, sometimes your effect isn't that severe, even if you shortened the hoofs and you've made something at the shoes. Yeah, so I just wanted to show you that you have very individual reactions. We can conclude we definitely have an effect on the breakover geometry. We can shorten the dorsal moment arm affecting the coffin joint. This is always good, even if we can't prove by science that the navicular region is relieved. I think it is, as we hope, because if you have maybe better techniques, we can prove it. We can also conclude then that we can shorten the breakover duration by our shoe modifications. And we can also conclude that the point of breakover and the locomotion pattern during breakover is very individual and is depending on different factors. One is our shoeing, but also other things like learning or pain. Yeah, so this is actually the outlook for the next webinars. So it is planned that other colleagues will give you some case reports about the influence of shoeing on breakover. I think it will be announced who will give the webinars soon. And yeah, if you have questions, I think there is some time, and Mehmet can maybe see who would like to say something. And yeah, I hope you had a nice presentation and you learned something.